This week's episode, we are joined by Tom Morris, Nine News chief football reporter, sports reporter, and this week you guys will see an insight into Tom that has never been seen before. We ask him questions that he's never been asked before, and he gives us answers that he's never had to really think about before until today. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan, and I'm joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Jeremy. But more importantly, we're joined by Tom Morris, the chief football reporter at Nine News Melbourne, also appearing on Footy Furnace and Footy Classified, and of course, SEN, one of my favourite go-to breakfast shows to listen to in the morning. How are you going?
Ilan, Jeremy, thank you very much for having me. What a great setup here. There's a pool room, table tennis table, and you guys are doing a great job. So thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. I'm curious, it's end of June almost, and the footy season's in full swing, and your job is probably as busy as it gets. What is the day in the life looking like for you?
Well, there's no day that's the same as another day. Probably to be honest, it gets busiest in the trade period when there's stories flying around everywhere. But I mean, my working week technically is Sunday to Thursday. So Sunday I get into the office early afternoon, prepare for the news that night, watch the footy, and then I'm on Footy Furnace in the evenings, which was last night because today's a Monday. Monday, again, you're meeting with people, you're talking to people, you're having lunches, you're into the office. I normally get into the office about lunchtime. That's sort of generically where I'm at, which might sound good, but you don't leave till sort of 7:30, and then on nights where there's classified or Footy Furnace, you don't leave till 9 or 10. So you end up being on call a lot as a journalist. Like if something breaks, you've got to be on. You know, like even last Friday, I get Fridays and Saturdays off technically, but I was chasing this story on Friday when I was meant to be spending time with my wife and my one-year-old baby, but I was on my phone, and I managed to confirm that the AFL is going to buy Waverley Park from Hawthorn, which should happen officially today or tomorrow. And so I thought, well, I've got to work. So I went into the office and I did a cross. So there's no 2 days that are the same, but broadly in footy season, you're on call the entire time, 7 days a week. And if you want to be any good, then you've got to be near your phone and you've got to be ready to go.
Has that changed the way that you have to now report and do your job? And when I say change the way, I'm talking about social media. You know, I was talking to my dad, last night, and he was saying, back in my day when we didn't have social media, reporting was just reading the columns in the newspaper, and you didn't really have that face to put to the person as well. Now with social media and collaborations and podcasts and everything, are you just on call all the bloody time?
It's changed so much. Even when I started, I was speaking to someone yesterday. My first year as a journalist was 2016. I was just a digital journalist at Fox Footy. So I'd write articles, wasn't really breaking any stories, just writing content. 2016, 2017, and then progressed from there. But even then, I wasn't posting my stories on Instagram. Like that just wasn't a thing. I don't think, maybe Instagram stories had just started. I was posting them on Twitter, which was Twitter then, not X. And nowadays, most stories don't hold to the news in the evening. If you try to hold a story from midday until 6 p.m, someone else is probably going to get it. So you've got to put it out on social media and then plug the news that night. So yeah, that's changed big time. And that's something that you've got to get your head around as well, because just nothing holds. And the other thing is, before my time, but if something big happened at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning in Melbourne in 1995, that would be front page or back page of the paper the next day. Now, if something big happens at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, it's got to be massive to be back page the next day, because by then everyone knows. So let's say hypothetically, I say as a hypothetical, Michael Voss gets sacked right now. That's back page tomorrow, no worries, because it's a big enough story. But the newspapers have become, in many ways, and I don't mean this disrespectfully because I love reading the newspaper, obsolete for breaking news. They're more about analysis and opinion and columns and things like that. So my job has evolved, and I didn't have a grand plan, but my job has evolved from being just a digital journalist to social media, TV, radio, hosting, cricket commentary, and broadening out my skill set. But it's all consuming, it's all encompassing, and I love it, but you have to be aware that it becomes your life, especially in footy season. From late February to the end of the trade period in mid-October, it is everything anyone talks about, it's all you do, and I've come to accept that.
How do you know which stories to chase, which ones are worth actually digging into versus ones that you can just disregard?
That's a constant issue, because sometimes you get tip-offs about certain things all the time. and I got a tip off in July last year that Joe Danaher would retire. I thought, that is too far-fetched. I'm not chasing that, because you can't chase everything you get told, because you'll go insane and most of it will be untrue. So I left it, and Mitch Cleary, who's a mate of mine, an excellent journalist, ended up breaking it the night before the grand final that Joe Danaher is considering retirement. I thought to myself, 3 months ago I left that, and he probably got messages at the same time as well. So I kicked myself because I missed that story. Other times you think you have something in early in the week, and you chase it all week and it ends up being not true, or you miss it, or you don't get it. So you're constantly balancing A, what the truth is, and B, once you get the truth, whether it's in the public interest to report, which is a really difficult thing as well.
I remember you said, I think it was on the Dos and D podcast, and shout out to them, that in 2019 you broke a story on Stephen May, my boy, my beloved defender, because I'm a D's man.
Yep.
And it's a story that you regretted breaking at the time, because you kind of look at the return on investment, right? You look at the impact it might have on the club and the player. And now in the context with more conversation around mental health, we saw kind of Jamara Ugelhagen go on a potty with Reece Matheson and Mitch Robinson and talking about how journalism can, obviously, it's got its benefits, but it can also negatively impact the players.
The media.
He had a crack at you as well.
Yeah.
So how do you balance as a journalist which story to break, knowing that it might impact a player's mental health, but also kind of chasing and doing your job?
It's something that you're balancing all the time. So my view, and I said this on Footy Classified, was that Jamara going to a health retreat or rehab shouldn't have been reported, because I think once someone seeks mental health support, then how they're going about that is not in the public interest. That's my view. Others might disagree, but we didn't report that on Channel 9, not trying to sound all high and mighty, we just didn't. But my view is, once you come back to the club and you're training, then everything's fair game around what you're doing, because you are a footballer. You know, so for Jamara yesterday, he was late to training on Saturday. Not a big story in any way, and I said that, not a massive story, but everything that Jamara does is going to get scrutinised to within an inch of its life. And probably not just Jamara, what footballers don't understand is how much journalists don't report to look after players. Like, Jamara's had a difficult time, but he's back training now, and I would have thought 5 days after returning to the club and being on such a tight leash and having to do everything he possibly can, that he should be bending over backwards to be at training on time. This is not to say that's enough to sack him. This is not to say it's enough to haul him over the coals and have a crack at him. But my lens is largely, almost entirely, around what affects the football club and the footballer. Now, others might completely disagree with that, and that's also absolutely fine. People have different lenses and different ideas of what creates a story. The Stephen May incident was one that, it still sits uncomfortably with me, because I went to school with Steve May. Like, I played footy with him at school. He was a year below me. I know him really well. He was having a beer on a Sunday when he was injured. And do I really care that Steve May was having a beer when he was injured? I actually couldn't care less. But at the time, I called Melbourne, and they cared. They said he's going to have to front the leadership group. They said they're not happy. So that was the story, that Melbourne was going to make him front the leadership group, that he's going to have to apologise. Now, if I had my time again, would I do that? Probably not. But you live and learn on these things as well. And it took a while for Steve and I to get back on reasonable terms after that, because he was going through a bit in his life at the time as well. So you're constantly learning along the journey what you should report, what you shouldn't. I've missed stories because I've been a bit conservative. I've probably gone a bit hard at stories because I've been a bit too aggressive. But that's just part of the industry. And no matter what you do, what I've realised is, no matter what you do, you're not going to have universal agreement on your stories. That just doesn't happen.
Something we talk about on the podcast ourselves is just not being a fence sitter entirely when you are discussing things that might have a little bit of controversy to them. When it comes to reporting, do you find that being a better reporter, or the better reporters, they aren't the fence sitters, they aren't afraid to break those stories that, yeah, it might impact their mental health maybe a little bit adversely, but if it's a good story, it's a good story.
The thing about mental health is, and clearly I'm no expert, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not I'm not widely read on the impacts of mental health around young people, but I think if you sign up to be an AFL footballer and you have a contract to be an AFL footballer, then reporting on a player at a club or in games around injuries is fair game. It's like I got criticised because I reported on Damien Hardwick, who quit Richmond. And people were saying, like, I can't believe you reported on this before he got the chance to announce it himself. I'm thinking to myself, this is a coach. No one's died here. Like, this is a coach who's quitting his club, who's already told some of his players. So, that's an element as well. It is difficult to weigh up, though, when something's going to affect someone's mental health. But if I'm going to be honest, like, everything you report negatively can affect someone's mental health. Like, if Max King's having surgery today, if I report that he's having surgery today and it comes out in the media that he's going under the knife and he's not going to play again this year and he's got an 8-year contract, does that affect him emotionally as well? So I think people are too quick to throw around the mental health card. It is significant, it does matter, but I'm not sure the general public necessarily understands that footballers sign up when they sign the contract to be in the public eye.
Do you believe that there'll be more policing now on football shows? I know there was the umpiring legal lawsuit that was about to get launched. I'm not overly privy in what's going on there, but do you think there's going to be... It's done? Do you think Do you think there'll be more policing in terms of the comments and the punditry you guys make on shows like Footy Classified because of the mental health, the speak of mental health and so forth?
I'm not sure. I mean, those comments that were made about those umpires, they were allegedly defamatory, which is why the umpires were considering legal action. In the end, the 3 people involved were apologised, so they moved on. The court of public opinion is a really difficult topic to talk about because, as I said, and what you alluded to before, you're never going to be popular with everyone with what you report. You're just not. The Damien Hardwick story is a legitimate football story, widely criticised. Like, how's that widely criticised when it's a coach that's stepping down? Sam Edmund, a colleague of mine at SEN, reported that Buddy Franklin was retiring before. I think it was before he had the chance to tell his teammates. Now, people would say, "Oh, that's disrespectful." I would say, a player retiring is a footy story. That's what it is. Now, ideally, you wait for him to tell his teammates, but Buddy Franklin's a huge name in the game. That's a footy story. So I'm not trying to pretend it's black and white, but my lens is almost entirely over what's a footy story as opposed to what's a non-footy story. If I see a player out at a nightclub and he's pissed, then I'm not going to report that because I don't think that's a footy story. But if he turns up to training hungover or isn't performing at his best because he's out 4 nights a week and there's photos of him, then that's a footy story. So, it's a real balancing act all the time. I'm not going to pretend I know it all, but that's where I'm at the moment.
Do clubs actually get briefed on that information? For example, I mean, you're telling us now that what is a footy story, what's not a footy story. Do the players, do the clubs, do they understand that, or is it just a little bit of a case-by-case scenario?
I think it's a case-by-case scenario, yeah. Not everyone understands. I mean, people have different lenses themselves. Like what one player thinks might be different to what another player thinks. One media manager might be different to a CEO. Where do you draw the line? But what you try to do is give everyone the heads up, so there's no surprises. So the Western Bulldogs last night knew I was going with a Jamara story. It's up to them if they want to tell him that I'm going to say he was late to training. It sounds so insignificant. It was a mention. I didn't dress it up. It didn't lead the show. It didn't even lead the news. It was just a mention that it's a delicate situation. Late to training, needs to be diligent going forward. Where you can, you try to give people the heads up as best you can. Sometimes they respond well. Sometimes they don't respond well, but at least they're not surprised. Yeah.
A huge theme of our show is navigating uncertainty in your 20s, and you've been a journo, I think you mentioned, since 16.
Yeah.
How have you navigated not just uncertainty, but like adversity as well throughout being in the media?
I've had a fair bit of adversity. There's been a bit that's gone on. Well, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I would have loved to become a journalist and just go about my business and have a nice smooth lifestyle and break some stories and write some stories and everything be linear. But in reality, that's not what happened. And very rarely in any career do you have a linear progression, especially when you're in the media. And this is a contact industry. But there's bumps and bruises all the time. Like some people would think that I give them bumps and bruises. Other people I would think that some people have been a bit harsh on me. But that's just what it is. And, that's not even me giving my opinion on certain things. Like, very rarely will I give my opinion. Whereas Kane Corns and others will throw, like, grenades at AFL players and coaches, because that's their job to give opinions. And on a slightly different note, like I would prefer an expert to give their opinion than to sit on the fence, speaking of fence sitters. So I don't agree with everything Kane says, but I would prefer that than a fence sitter every day of the week, because that is their role. You're being paid good money to tell us what you think. But yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty. You know, like I had a stable job at Fox Footy, I got sacked, and then all of a sudden I didn't have a full-time job for 15 months. Sorry, didn't have a full-time job for 18 months. So at the age of 29 or 30, that's a lot to take in. But I think it makes you stronger in the end.
What did you learn about yourself?
What did I learn about myself in that time? I learned that I wasn't invincible when I probably thought I was. I needed to have more gratitude for people around me and the roles that I've been given. I learned that probably, you know, this stems from the conversation we just had, that not everything is black or white, that there is more nuance in the world, there's more grey. And I also learned that living a life of chasing stories hard, exercising hard, socialising hard, partying hard is actually not sustainable. Like, it's fine in your 20s, and I did all that, but not to say I'm some sort of, you know, recluse now, sitting at home, patting my dog, but like, I've certainly got more balance in my life now. So I learned the importance of balance, which I don't think I necessarily had back then. Like, there's people that work really hard and don't exercise, and they become terribly unfit. I was like, no, the harder I work, the harder I'm going to exercise. I'm going to play cricket, I'm going to play footy, I'm going to see my mates all the time. There's not a second of any day where I'm not going to be on. And now I think I've found a better balance, as much as possible when you're a journo, of being on and off, which was a humbling experience, but it's something that I went through.
You genuinely seem like you love your job. Like, you've got such a passion for your job, for reporting, for sport in general. So when that happens, when your job gets taken away from you and you love it, and that's your life, that's you, what are the next steps you take?
Well, one of the issues was that my work became my identity. So I've just met you both, so you might see me as a sports journalist, but I had to work really hard to rediscover who I actually was beyond that, you know, because like we shouldn't be defined by our jobs, you know, like it's a big part of our life. We do it all the time, 5 days a week, but we are more than that. Like, I've got a family, I've got friends, I've got a history well before I became a sports journalist, and a future beyond that as well. So I let that job become too much, identify me too much. It became all-consuming. And then the next steps were decompressing and unpacking that, which was an incredibly difficult process. And I can only speak about it now because it's in hindsight, but it didn't take a couple of months. Like, that took probably 2 years, I reckon. And also, it's not the fact it took 2 years, it's the fact that I didn't know when I'm gonna have that light bulb moment, or when I'm gonna have that moment of clarity where I think, okay, now I feel better about myself. And it literally probably took 2 years to have that moment.
What was that moment, and how did you get to that moment?
Well, the key was, for me, I had to forgive myself eventually for what happened, because I felt terribly guilty for what I'd said about a colleague in a WhatsApp group. But I just couldn't get over the fact that I'd affected so many people's lives, not just my family and my friends and people around me who were embarrassed and ashamed and disappointed with me, but also the people that I'd actually offended and hurt, including my colleague at Fox and other friends, and also people I didn't know, that all of a sudden, thought that, and understandably thought that I was a representation of like toxic masculinity in sport. So there was all these competing things coming at me, which I found difficult to unpack. And but in the end, I every night I put my head on the pillow and I'd be unable to forgive myself. Not because I felt bad, but because I'd affected people around me. At the age of 29 or 30, I'd had a girlfriend for a few years. We're about to buy a house. Looking to get married, start a family, and all of a sudden that's put on hold because I'm a pig or because I'm an idiot. Whatever words you want to use, I can think of many others as well. So that was really difficult to unpack in my own mind. But I got recommended this book by this person who's become a friend called Rana Hussain. Rana works in the media. She's great, and she's been on Offsiders. She was the head of She's helped at Cricket Australia and Richmond Football Club. She's a Muslim woman, and she reached out to me after all that happened, even in a matter of days. And she said, "Tom, what you said was disgusting, but I want to reach out to you just to offer my support." I thought, geez, what a woman. Anyway, we got talking, and we started to slowly build a friendship, which was an unlikely friendship given what had happened. But I really appreciated her understanding and her willingness to listen and support. And she recommended this book called So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson, I think his name is. It was written in 2015, and it's sort of a series of short stories, real stories about people that have been publicly humiliated by what they've done or situations they've been in. And sort of the poster person is Monica Lewinsky, which was the first sort of public shaming in the digital age. That was broken on the internet. At the time, the internet wasn't really a thing in the late 90s. Other examples in there, this woman is in London, I think, and she fires off a tweet trying to be funny about South Africans. In fact, it's a racist tweet. Gets on the plane, lands in Cape Town, and she's already been sacked, and her faces are all over the media, and her whole life has blown up in that 10-hour flight or whatever it is. So anyway, there's all these short stories, and there's a few pages of this book that really just gives me shivers talking about it, because it taught me the value of forgiving yourself. I felt terrible for so long, and I still feel terrible, but I couldn't move forward until I said, Tom, give yourself a second chance. And once that happened, things started to fall into place.
I think it's one of those things as well. There's a lot of people that'll criticize you, but they won't be open about some of the mistakes they've made. And I think we as humans, we're all inherently flawed. We're all going to make mistakes. And unfortunately, there's going to be times where those mistakes are actually broadcast for the world to see. But I like the point you made there about forgiving yourself and that enabling you to kind of move through everything. What kind of journalist do you feel like you are now versus the one you were beforehand?
I feel like I'm a better journalist now than what I was beforehand. But people who are critical of the Jamara story might disagree. They might say, no, that's trash bag journalism. So you can only stay true to what you think your values are and listen to the people around you. I think I'm a more balanced journalist. I know that I am not reporting stuff that I'm aware of now that I used to report. Now, this is not to say I deserve a badge or a medal for that, just that I'm probably more circumspect and more balanced in my reporting. But this is not to say I'm the finished article either. There's sometimes I do a story and I'm thinking to myself, oh God, did I get that right? Did I get the right balance? Was my wording correct there? So it's a constant battle in my own mind about what should be reported, how it should be reported, how hard you should go. But speaking to people around me, my wife would say this, I'm a lot more level, calm person than probably what I was in my late 20s when I was living that lifestyle I spoke about before.
Do you feel like gaining the respect was something that you had to do? Because we look at you from the outside of footy lovers, and we just see you're bloody everywhere, mate. You're reporting, you're on radio, you're on TV, and it's awesome to see. And that's where I speak about the passion for the job. Yeah. We see that only someone that loves their job would be able to commit to that level of work. Yeah. So do you feel like that has then now transitioned into gaining respect back from some of those people that you mentioned before?
I'm sure that I've gained respect back from some people. I'm sure that I still have no respect from other people, and I've probably lost respect amongst some others. But this is the thing that allows me to move forward is people who don't know me. So if they can have their assessments, they can have their judgments, and that's okay. If someone dislikes me because of what happened, I completely get that. I can't argue with that. In the eyes of some, that's unforgivable. And I'm very lucky to be back in a job. I thought I was done. I thought I wouldn't get work again. But it's not a goal of mine to earn respect of people I don't know. It is a goal of mine and a constant ambition to make sure that people around me who know me respect me and understand me and have respect for the work that I do and the person that I am. I think that's what's important as well. Random people on social media that criticize you, it actually doesn't bother me one little bit. But it's taken a while to get to that, that's for sure. Because there was a time there it really did.
How do you manage the relationships, especially with people you need? Or for example, Luke, I think of the Luke Beveridge situation.
Bevo?
Yeah, well, how is that relationship going?
We're actually okay. I went to a media conference last week and he was great. So I mean, we're never going to be best mates, I think, as you saw on Footy Classified. But I've said from the very start, I've actually got no issue with Bevo. Like, what he did in that media conference, in his own words, was over the top, but it didn't offend me. And it didn't, I didn't go, geez, that really hurt what he was saying, because some of it was just factually wrong. And the other bit of it was just him sticking up for his club, and that's okay. So, no, Bevo and I are never going to be best mates, but we're fine as well.
But how do you navigate kind of those relationships in the footy world or even the cricketing world where you do want to do your job, but you've got some relationships that are better than others?
For sure.
How do you go about that?
That even the very best journalists have broken relationships at times with people. Mike Sheen, Caroline Wilson, Robert Craddock in cricket. Like, they, not comparing myself to them, but they're the most senior journalists, and they still have broken relationships with some people. This is not to say I go out there looking to break some sort of trust or relationship, but as I said, it's a combative business, and the best stories, as Caro always says, are the ones that make you feel sick in the stomach, and they're often the ones that affect people and sometimes affect their lives as well, and that's what's difficult. But in terms of managing those relationships, again, you just try to give people the heads up. If you've got a story about them, go directly to them if you can, or at least at the club, so they can get the heads up. Be accurate. Be factual, and what comes after that, hopefully in time, is okay. You know, Steve May and I are okay now, because in time I've apologised to him and we're fine. Bevo and I are okay, because although there's been no apology either way, and I didn't expect any apology from him, and there wasn't going to be one from me, there's been sort of a moving on element now. It's 4 years ago. So time does heal wounds to an extent, even though he sort of indicated that wouldn't be the case. Managing relationships is tough, but I think people that know me know that I am trustworthy. You know, I'll never reveal a source to anyone, and that I'm doing my best to be as factual and clear as I can every story I do.
Sick in the stomach story. How do you even get that? And will you always talk about them? Will you always publicise them?
Well, they're often just the bigger stories. So I use the Damien Hardwick one for an example. Like, that won me an award, but it was about 4 hours of work. Like, I've worked for weeks and months on stories that I've got nothing. And I worked on that story for literally about 4 hours and got the story up. And that made me feel sick in the stomach, because the whole football landscape changes. Because you know that people up in Brisbane and Perth and Adelaide and people in London are seeing that story on their phone. They're going, what, Hardwick's quitting? And they're sending it to their mates. And all of a sudden it's going around the world. So that was the highest rating article on SEN that year. I don't know how many clicks it had. Like 10, I think it was more than 100,000 clicks on that article. Again, you don't do it for clicks, but that story that sits in your stomach is because you had this little person on your shoulder going, what if I've got this wrong? You know, but I knew I didn't have it wrong. But even so, like, what if I stuff this up? I'm cooked here. There's been other examples like that as well, where you go, oof, okay, you just got to deal with that feeling of trepidation. Like, I did a story last year on Petrarca, who was unhappy at the club. The story was never denied. In fact, the story was proven in the end to be correct. That he was unhappy, he wanted out, he just couldn't get out because he's contracted. I think he's okay now. But I felt sick in the stomach before I did that, because I thought to myself, I'm reporting something here, and the response is automatically going to be, well, we're not trading him. And so that's okay. It doesn't matter that you're not trading him, because this is how he feels. And that was difficult as well to do, because you're affecting his life, you're affecting other people around him.
With rumours, when do you know when to report a rumour and when to not report a rumour? Does anything ever hold you back when you don't have something of clarity, of trueness to it?
Yeah, for sure. You might get told something, and if there's 5 elements to the story, and 4 elements are correct and 1 element is wrong, then the story is wrong. So you got to make sure. Like, I get told stuff all the time, and the people that tell me aren't lying to me. They just got it slightly wrong. It's like a game of whispers. Because if you tell him something, then you tell someone else, and you tell me. Logic tells you that by the time it gets to me, it's going to be slightly different to what it is in truth. You know, you might think a player's done a calf. In fact, what they've done, they might have done an Achilles. And you say a calf and it's an Achilles, you've got it wrong. So you're constantly having to wade through the truth there. Or just deciding, like with Joe Danaher, it's not even worth it because it's just a load of shit, when in fact it was true. So that's one of the toughest bits of the job for sure.
Yeah. With that though, does it ever get to the point where you will have an urge to report something, even if you still have a little bit of hesitation to whether it is true, but it's too good of a story, and you just have that urge to report it, but the way in which you report it is maybe a little bit vague or not as accurate.
Yeah, so you try to walk back the story. So I'm trying to think of an example. Like, I knew that Mateus Philippou had a corky earlier on in the year, and I was very confident he wasn't going to play. Like, I was being told by someone that would know, he's not playing, Tom. Like, this corky's significant. He'll be back the week after, but he's not playing. The club said to me, no, we're going to name him. So then I had a decision to make. It's like, if I say he's not playing and they name him, and then miraculously he has a great recovery and plays, I look like an idiot. So I think my wording with that one was, he's in significant doubt, the corky. So you still get the story, but you don't nail it the way that you otherwise would. You know, like, there might be a trade story where you know that a player is looking to get out, but if you say this player wants to leave, it gets denied straight away. So what do? So you're better off saying, you know, a watch on this player, because there's clubs that are interested in him. They believe that he's looking at a move. You know, so there's ways around wording things that are a little bit technical, but it is important exactly how you word it.
How much information are you currently holding on to that you know that you haven't revealed yet, that's a work in progress, that you know could have massive implications for the season ahead?
Jimmy Bartell actually asked me this in the ad break last night. He goes, are you holding on to anything? Yeah, you're always holding onto something. Like, I've got a notepad on my phone where it's rolling notes. So I start the week with whatever date it is today, 23rd of June, and then I just take notes as I hear stuff throughout the week, and I format what's important and what's not. Most of the stuff never sees the light of day, but yeah, you're always holding on to certain stories that might be true down the track. Like, if I know, like, let's say it's not true, but let's say Andrew Brayshaw, for example, wants to go to, wants to go to Gold Coast. Just pick a team. So at the moment it's June. If I report today that Andrew Brayshaw wants to be traded to Gold Coast, and then he changes his mind in August, then I'm wrong. So what do? So you're better off actually not touching those sorts of stories, because there's so long to go. Like last year, Rory Lobb wanted to be traded, and I said Rory Lobb wants out. Now by the end of the year, he'd been moved to defence, and it all changed. So he no longer wanted out, but at the time it was true. So they're the things you're constantly weighing up as well, yeah.
Is there any exclusive stories you could reveal here on the Big Bros podcast?
I'd love to. If you got me at a different time, maybe if my phone went at a different time. It is going a little bit now. But no, sometimes you have weeks where stories are just coming up everywhere. Like, it's great. You know, you're talking to people. Yep, there's a story, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when I'm on the news, it's easy because there's stuff happening. There's other weeks, and this was the case a couple of weeks ago. Often around the bye weeks, there's just nothing going on. Like, you think to yourself, there's nothing happening in footy today. So they're the hard weeks as well. And you don't want to manufacture something that's false, clearly, and you never would. But you need to find something to talk about as well.
What do you think people should know about you that don't know about you? What would be one thing that you would like for people to know about you that you often feel maybe misunderstood about, or that you think, yeah, this is actually who I am, that you don't see?
That is such a good question. That's probably the best question I've ever been asked. So I've never thought about it as well. What would I like people to know about me that they don't know about me? I think it's that I'm more of a regular guy than what maybe people think. Not like regular might be the wrong word. Like, I'm just a normal guy. Like, I've got a family, I've got a wife with a baby. I've had personal heartache as well. We lost mum a couple of years ago to brain cancer. I've got two sisters who are primary school teachers. Dad was a school teacher. He retired last year. I had a normal childhood. I wasn't probably what people misunderstand most about. They think I'm some, like I've grown up with a silver spoon in my mouth, which is not the case at all. Like, my dad was a teacher at Melbourne Grammar, so the only reason we were able to send me to Melbourne Grammar is because we got a 50% discount, which was great. But like, my parents worked really hard to send me to Melbourne Grammar and my two sisters to PLC and Melbourne Girls Grammar. Like, private schools, yes, not pretending that we're living in the slum or anything like that, but like, there was, they had to sell their house when we were young in order to make sure we could continue to go to these schools. So I'm not trying to pretend I lived a hard childhood or a difficult childhood, and in the eyes of many, and probably fair enough, like, I had a privileged childhood, but I'm a regular, like, suburban sports fan who loved cricket in the summer, footy in the winter. I love soccer. I love playing golf. I love watching tennis. I'm not abnormal to the average person. And when people come up to me sometimes, especially like footy fans who seem to think they know me, I think they're quite surprised that I'm just able to have a normal conversation about various things. I don't identify myself through my job. I did, but I work hard now to know that I'm more than just a journalist. And I don't think anyone should have their identity entirely defined by what they do for work, even though it is important. I don't know, does that answer the question?
It's a brilliant answer. Thank you so much. I think a lot of people would love to hear that. So
we all go through things.
Oh, God,
and I see the comments, like some people like, Silver Spoon, he walks straight back into media after getting sacked. It's like, well, I get the view that I shouldn't be back in media at all. I understand that, and I thought that would be the case for a long time. But I didn't walk straight back in. There was 2 years there where I didn't have an income. Like that, not only an income, but no prospect of an income. And that's hard to work through. And some people think I should have had 5 years out, and that's fine. But I'm a big believer in second chances. I'm not a big believer in third or fourth chances. So I know for the rest of my career, I'm on my last chance. So I'm comfortable with that because I'm confident that I've learnt my lesson. But don't stuff up again. Don't go back to being the person that you were, because then it'll all fall in a heap.
If you had 5 minutes with 25-year-old Tom, what would you tell him?
I'd tell him to slow down. Not just the way he talks, because I naturally talk quite quick. And that's constantly something I'm having to work on. But I'd tell him to slow his life down. I'd tell him to just live in the present a bit more. I'd tell him to find a better balance between ambition and perspective. It's important to be ambitious and want more and have drive in your careers, and that's you don't get anywhere without that. But I had this sort of underlying perspective that I was never satisfied. I'd get to it, I'd want the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and that was the difficult life to live. So I would say just slow down and just have better balance, I think. Would probably be my advice to myself when I was 25. I was having great fun, but it just wasn't, looking back, and I didn't know this at the time, it just wasn't sustainable.
Were you ever uncertain about your career pathway? Because that is something that we often talk about here, and we see it amongst our friendship group. We see it amongst young kids coming out of school into uni and uncertain about what they want to do, whether what they're studying is right for them, or what the hell do they even study. So
you mean when I was younger or after I got sacked?
No, when you were younger, when you were going through your early 20s, did you know that this was always going to be for you?
Nah. So there's some sports journalists that they're made for the industry. Like Xander Maguire is 22. He's clearly got great DNA in journalism, and so he was looking at him like he's always destined to be a gun sports journo. But I did a sports journalism course at La Trobe, and even during that course, I was working at St Kilda Footy Club, doing some content, some social media, but I had no real desire to be on television or be breaking stories until the age of sort of 26 or 27, which is quite late. The year after school, I was enrolled in arts at Melbourne, didn't really know what I wanted to do, went and played cricket overseas. So it's not like I left school and said, I want to be a news-breaking footy journalist. Like some people, they do cadetships, they get into it and away they go. I always knew broadly I liked media and content and writing and sport, but I remember getting told in, I think it was year 10 at school, that half of you will have jobs when you're 35 that didn't exist, that don't exist now. So the year 10 for me was 2007. I'm looking at it now going, in 2007, there's no Instagram. Facebook was in its infancy. There was no Twitter. There was the podcasting world didn't exist. So a lot of what I do actually didn't exist back then as well. But there was no grand plan to become what I am now. It's important to have goals, but I sort of didn't set myself too many goals because I didn't quite know how it was going to play out.
Did that ever stress you out? I mean, when you took that break, you went to play cricket overseas. What happened after that? You come back, and did you have a little bit more of a clear outline as to what you wanted to do?
Well, I just started this course at La Trobe Sports Journalism degree. I thought, this is cool. And again, this was a mother of a friend of mine that told my mum that there's this new course opening at La Trobe. So it's just by luck. Imagine if she hadn't told my mum that. Mum wouldn't have told me, and I might have got there eventually, but I just started this course. It was the first year of the course. It combined sports management with media studies and journalism, and it was just the course doesn't exist anymore, but it was great. I met lots of people through that course. That's how Josh Gabelich and I became friends. Sophie Keisha, who's now an influencer, and I were in the same class. There's plenty of others as well. So I wouldn't say there was any anxiety around what I wanted to do, because I think I was just ignorant. I was just living my life, enjoying whatever my early 20s was. But I had no concept of what it was to actually properly work hard and be driven to succeed. And I was lucky in a way, because unlike you guys, like I was limited in what I could do, because I was English and history and politics and geography, like were my subjects. Maths, no good. Science, no good at all. Didn't even do maths in year 12. So I knew that I could never be a lawyer or a doctor or work in finance or mortgage broker. That just wasn't even on my radar. So I knew it had to be something in humanities media. So I probably was lucky in that way that I wasn't skilled enough to have a broad range of jobs that I could possibly do.
Tom, before we wrap up, we just want to say a massive thank you for coming on the Big Bros podcast. We've enjoyed kind of getting an understanding of this side to you that we often don't see when you're on TV. So massive thank you.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me. You guys are doing a great job, and your questions were bang on. So well done.
Thank you.